chaos in the tomb. It's time to talk about the absolute bombshell that this map has dropped on us in Black Ops 6 Zombies. For years, we have been debating whether chaos was canon, whether Alistair Rhodes' line in Vanguard was just a fun little reference, or if we were seeing a fully fledged integration of the chaos storyline into the Dark Aether mythos. Well, with the tomb, Trek has just about screamed in our faces that not only is chaos canon, it's a fundamental part of the story moving forward, as if it wasn't already obvious so. Now, I did make a previous video about all of the chaos connections and ties on Citadelle Des Morts, including the fact that Bruno and potentially even Alistair Rhodes could be still alive and could be involved in the storyline in the future. I will leave a link to that video in the description and on screen if you want to check it out after you are done with this one. This is a direct follow-up on that, so let's get into it, breaking down all of the connections, all of the references on this map to the chaos story, and exactly how they tie together, because so many people have so many questions about what exactly is going on, especially the new lore implications regarding the Sentinel Artifact. The biggest detail is that the amulet is not acting as a key for the Odin artifact, as we previously speculated would happen on this map. In fact, it still has the same key from Scarlet's necklace atop it. Instead, the amulet seems to merge with it and power it into a super Sentinel Artifact, and yes, it was the Odin artifact on Sam's computer screen in the Terminus ending, but we were unaware if that was just a placeholder for the artifact and we were instead going to discover a new one on this map, but no, it definitely is still the Odin one. The amulet is even hinted to be some sort of pocket dimension, and we see a galaxy within it, which then allows us to reconnect with the lost memories of Archibald. So this surely ties into Richtofen's plans with distorting the Dark Aether with it and restoring the souls of his families through memories, as nothing is dead if the memory remains. The Obscurus Attilium is even described on the map as being the heart of the Dark Aether via its irrespective theme. Implying it could literally be its core, containing all possibility, or even the ether itself as it was banished into the Dark Realm.
The amulet. Are you getting anything useful from whoever it is channeling?
Oh, Sir Toodlepip. Mostly I'm glad I don't work for him. One word about the weaker sex and he'd be spitting teeth. The amulet looks like it contains a tiny galaxy. It makes me wonder if this is all happening inside it.
And you are making me wonder what you smoked for breakfast. And if you have any more.
Could it even be the Dark Aether Nexus we go into on the map that's rift is opened using the amulet could actually be a pocket dimension inside the amulet itself? Right off the bat, one of the biggest confirmations comes from the fact that Scarlet Rhodes, the main protagonist of the Chaos storyline, is directly referenced by name. In an intel log, Archibald recalls that Alistair Rhodes missed her birth while on an adventure with him, which is something we already knew from Black Ops 4.
So, let me see if I have this quite straight. You want me, Sir Archibald Fotherington Smythe, renowned archaeologist and peer of the realm, to go grub around in some tawdry, run-of-the-mill Roman ruins on a burial mound in the south of France that none of the locals will go anywhere near?
That's about the size of it, yes.
And if I find that, what did you call it, Sentinel Artifact, that I'm to bring it to you, not publish, not alert the happy scribes of the Royal Archaeological Review, not mark the occasion with even an inch of print in the Times.
Seems like you have the measure of it. Yes.
Well, no. I mean, it sounds hateful. I shan't do it.
Oh, look, old man, not to put too fine a point on it. What else are you going to do with your time? The Egyptian government aren't going to grant you a permit for your own dig. Not so soon after that mummy business.
Now, look here. I told you I genuinely thought that mummy was one we'd excavated fair and square.
Archie, it belonged to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo.
Yes, but it was right next to our cargo on the dock.
And it was intended as a gift from the people of Egypt to the King of Spain.
But they all barely well look the same.
When you were seen waltzing a 2,000-year-old mummy around in broad daylight, singing a rugby song about the daughter of a local tradesman.
Well, I had rather a lot to drink, I will admit that.
We've known each other a long time, Archie. We go back, don't we?
Oh, I should say so. Wasn't old Flinders big at tennis?
1885. I remember because I missed Scarlett's birth for it. My wife was furious. But Archibald O'Bean, my point is this. In all that time, have I ever steered you wrong?
No, I suppose you haven't.
Well, what say this? You take the expedition, and I'll be sure to smooth things over with the Egyptian authorities. We'll have you back in the sandpit in no time.
And you'll cover the cost of the whole dig?
Absolutely. First-class steamer cabins and champagne all the way.
All this Sentinel jazz seems jolly important. Why aren't you handling it yourself?
Would you believe me if I told you I was keeping a low profile because I'm having a spot of bother with a cult?
Probably not. Tell you what, if you'll throw in a couple of cases of that saucy 70 claret, we have ourselves a deal.
You know how to squeeze a fellow dry. Deal.
Excellent. Well, I shall commence my preparations at once. Pots! Damn your eyes, man! Where the devil are you? Load the motor car! We're off!
Archibald! Sir Archibald! It's after 2 in the bloody morning! Best of British, old man. You will most assuredly be needing it.
This alone tells us that we are not just dealing with some reinvention of the character. This is the very same Alistair Rhodes, and not an alternative version in this new universe. This story has always been a part of this new universe, and therefore the same Scarlet Rhodes exists in this timeline. The mention is particularly significant because it marks the first time a canon event from Black Ops 4's Chaos storyline has been explicitly acknowledged in the Dark Aether narrative so far. Before, we've only seen nods or indications, but never an outright narrative thread. And in fact, the date she was born, 1885, is the very same day she was born in the old storyline, confirming that the dates of everything within the Chaos storyline is still lining up and matching our new universe. Up until now, we've only seen characters and concepts cross over, but this is the first time we have a concrete event that took place in both stories. This was the first major confirmation that theorists who suspected the two stories were the same might have been right all along. This conversation is also seemingly taking place at Alistair's mansion, the location we play in Dead of the Night. And in fact, in one of the teasers before the map released, Archibald says, "This sight, blithering well, doth both baffle and amaze. I suppose I shall have to thank Alistair for more than just the contents of his cellar." This is a direct reference to Dead of the Night's wine cellar, the very place where the Order tied him up, as seen in the music video for the map, and a reference to how Alistair and him would often party and get drunk together, which are the contents he's referring to, as referenced as well in the Citadelle Des Morts conversation with them. Treyarch also seemed to be using this intel to dispel a common fan theory about Scarlet among leftover fans of the Chaos storyline. Often, people theorize that the real reason Scarlet was sick as a child and that we never saw her mother was that her mother was some sort of mythological creature or goddess, making Scarlet a demigod. However, with the casual mention of her mother here and no implication she is anything but human, it seems Treyarch are attempting to deconfirm this old fan theory. Could this be because they have plans for Scarlet in the future? We shall see. And it's just so funny how bad a father Alistair was. No wonder Scarlet wanted nothing to do with him, missing his father's birth to go on these wild goose chases. Whilst being renowned in the world, he wasn't good to his family. Alistair also mentions currently having to keep a low profile because he is dealing with a cult following him. The cult is, as far as we know, the Order of Chaos, the first direct reference of the Order in the Dark Aether story, who would currently also be pursuing the Sentinel Artifacts. and by this point have already had run-ins with Alistair, where they pursue him as well. Not only do we get Scarlet's birth year confirmed to be the same one from the Chaos storyline 1885, but we get another date that lines up with the Chaos story in the marketing for the map. Trek said, rumour has it a British archaeologist began an excavation at the dig site back in 1908 and was never heard from again. What was he searching for? This is the date that Archibald went on his expedition for the artifact here. 1908 is very interesting because it's just a year before 1909, the very year that the Rosicrucian Order was formed, led by the High Priest of Chaos to find the Sentinel Artifacts. This date alignment was clearly intentional. As I said before, Trek are not messing with their dates here at all. So far, none of the dates have contradicted the events of the Chaos storyline. They are slotting them in very nicely, so they are not retconning anything. And it's as if the Chaos story was always meant to be our first introduction to the Dark Aether story, and could have even been a twist in that game that the new universe that Eddie and Sam would go into would actually be the Chaos universe. I think had Chaos been received differently, that could have been a big twist ending at the end, and wouldn't have contradicted Jason Blundell's infamous quote about them not being connected because the Aether story was over. Whilst connected to the Dark Aether story, it's still its own chapter. Another date that aligns is in the blog for the map that reads, built on the remains of ancient burial grounds with suspected origins dating back to 2500 BC, these catacombs went undisturbed for centuries until the early 1900s, and what lies beneath may run deeper than anyone ever imagined. As rumours have it, a British archaeologist by the name of Sir Archibald Fotherington Smythe conducted an excavation at the site back in 1908 with grand expectations. Although no one can say for sure what became of him, a handful of photographs from his doomed expedition have recently surfaced. The 2500 BC date also calls back to a recent video that I did on the mythology of Citadelle Des Morts and how it ties to the Nine and the Order, and the Knights Templars, the storyline of Seguy de Saint Michel, the Owl, which for some weird reason is just completely absent from the lore of the tomb. I don't know if it was because it was cut or if the map was rushed or something and they didn't get time to expand on it, because the owl's head is literally in the spawn of the map being excavated and it's not mentioned literally at all, so it's so jarring. I was expecting us to learn so much about the owl on this map and I don't know why we don't, as well as no further reference to his 4 bastard sons. But I will have a link to that video on screen and in the description and how that stuff ties into the Chaos story. Regardless, this new character, Archibald, seems to exist as a living, at least at one time, connection between the Chaos and Dark Aether stories. He's a British explorer, friend of Alistair Rhodes, and Alistair, for reasons we will see soon, requests him to run this dig site for the Sentinel Artifact in Avalon. Side note. Archibald would do just that, and ends up exploring the depths of the tomb with his crew, until his right-hand man ends up abandoning him, taking most of their crew with him. Alone, Archibald would continue to explore and end up finding his way to the artifact, and go down the same path we do to find it in the boss fight. However, just before grabbing the artifact, he spots a bottle of port that he assumes was left behind by the others. Due to being an alcoholic, he couldn't resist, loving his booze just like Alistair. When he picks it up to take a drink though, it reveals itself to be none other than a mimic.
Looks a bit structurally iffy.
All these weeks searching, the Sentinel Artifact in the flesh, so to speak. Mine for the I say, is that a decanter? Oh, that damned Potts must have squirreled it away. Rum Cove got everything he deserved, what? Still, a spot of port might be just the...
Just like it also mimicked his comrades before. It bites his face and explains why we have to acquire his monocle by killing this mimic, as it consumes it. The mimic could be electrically charged due to the crazy place, as we do see electric storm clouds pulsating throughout in the cracks and crevices. We can also see Archibald's body at the boss arena, so at the very least, mimics do not like eating bones apparently, but might have eaten his flesh or regurgitated his body. On top of the direct mention to Scarlet Rhodes, we get another name drop from the Chaos story to Stanton Shaw, one of the original Chaos crew members in this radio.
Dashed decent of you to have me out to the country pile for a spot of shooting on. Pish and tosh. think nothing of it. It's been, what, 5 years? Far too long. And besides, my motives aren't entirely altruistic. Truth is, there's a small matter I want to discuss with you, but that can wait. After you.
Ah, finally, into the inner sanctum. I say, this is quite the private archive you have here. Is that a first edition of Description de l'Egypte?
Naturally. If you don't mind.
And these artifacts, all spoils from your expeditions, I suppose?
In the main, yes, with a few personal curios thrown in for good measure.
Oh, by Jove! This Bordeaux is the cat's meow. Don't tell me it's the 1870.
Archie, be a good chap. Please, be careful with that.
Oh, this old thing? Didn't Scarlet gad about wreaking havoc on the ants with it when she was small?
Quite so. And having survived that, I'd hate to lose it now. It's quite irreplaceable. One of a kind, you see.
Oh, good Lord, how do you read with this?
It's not for reading, Archie. The monocle's lens is milled from some very particular quartz glass that I went to quite extreme lengths to procure.
Not for reading, I should hope not. Practically a magnifying glass.
Sir Archibald, you are at present juggling the objective lens through which Galileo first charted the transit of Jupiter's moons across the face of that most majestic of spheres. And I really must insist that you most carefully put it down.
Let's just put you back where you belong. No harm done, eh? Alistair, what and why and indeed, what is that doing in your possession?
Galileo wasn't just a mathematician astronomer. He was an alchemist. I got to thinking, what if that telescope of his was a product of more than just the physical sciences? Had he perhaps goosed it with all the skills he had at his disposal? And what mysteries he unveiled with that wondrous instrument. I had to have it. I was right, Archie. That lens reveals hidden things. It makes the occult, well, known as absconditus, I suppose.
But Alistair, how on this green earth did you get hold of it?
That, Archibald, is a secret that shall ever remain between myself, a museum in Florence, and a certain Mr. Stanton Shaw, Esquire.
Again, this isn't a mere Easter egg, it's evidence that the characters from Chaos existed and were active in this timeline, further reinforcing that this isn't just a fun little nod, but rather an actual confirmation of that storyline. And I really do hope that Treyarch confirm what happened after Ancient Evil. Whilst they alluded as such on Citadelle Des Morts, we need some direct information. They were implying Bruno was alive, but we don't know what happened to the rest. It almost makes it seem like, considering they're name-dropping all of these characters, could Treyarch plan on doing a game with the Chaos crew in the future, potentially after COD 2025 with the original characters. Because why else would this game be taking such a Chaos focus if it's just for a love letter for them, when it was really an ignored storyline by the community until Ancient Evil? Surely they have bigger plans, or at least I hope so. They are busy obviously working on a lot of content right now, so they probably don't have an exact idea of what they want to do after Call of Duty 2025, but maybe continuing with these characters could be the way to go, if they do successfully wrap up things with the original characters, assuming they don't want to milk them for games and games and games again, but they sell money. The name drop of Stanton Shaw is also the very end of the intel, framing it as a sort of big reveal or climactic point. When the only recurring character that has been mentioned so far from the Chaos story was Alistair Rhodes, it was easy to imagine it was simply a nod by having a new version of the character. But Treyarch are throwing that out of the window, and at this point I feel it takes more mental leaps to assume this is is a story that so far is exactly the same as Chaos, but somehow different, rather than just making the more logical assumption that it is all one continuous story. As before Black Ops 6 Zombies, I really just felt like it was just a part of the prior multiverse that got plunged into the Dark Aether, and Alistair was going to be a different version of himself. Now that all of the dates align and we have so many characters being referenced, that is clearly not the case, and there's no way to think otherwise. Now for the Sentinel Artifact, the most important thing and the most important plot device throughout Black Ops 6 Zombies, that is the through line merging all of the maps together, which is absolutely wild to think about because we would have absolutely never expected before the release of this game that the Chaos storyline was going to be the most important thing for the story, whilst Richtofen is currently still on the backseat, and even his plan itself is going to be regarding the artifact. Of course, the Sentinel Artifact, or artifacts, have been a major piece of the Chaos Zombies history for years. Although the story itself only spanned a year, we've been talking about them ever since, especially since Kraft mentioned it. And the Sentinel Artifact's role in the tomb is absolutely massive. A piece of intel in the ending cutscene of the tomb, revealed by Sam unlocking the documents from Janus, explains that the Sentinel Artifact functions by harnessing certain energies to fill the receptacles on it and store, create, and manipulate prima materia. In the modern world of the Dark Aether story, the only place these energies are able to be harvested is Liberty Falls, according to the Sam AI. However, this process directly mirrors what we saw in Voyage of Despair. This is just like how we use Catalyst elemental energy in Chaos, gathering it during the Sentinel trials as steps for their Easter eggs. The Easter egg tracker for the Chaos maps also shows us filling the receptacles as we complete steps for the quest in Chaos maps. This is now explained thanks to Black Ops 6, and we know we gathered the Chaos energy and were quite literally filling those receptacles to create prima materia. It was not simply just merely a HUD element. We need to charge these symbols for it to function. Craft's file 4A7 on the Odin artifact reads, Rhodes' collection of ancient texts and depictions of Sentinel artifacts led me to conclude that they function as batteries for gathering, storing, and manipulating the substance that came to be known in alchemical circles as prima materia. Descriptions of the rituals indicate each artifact is ringed with receptacles that need to be completely filled in order to render the artifact operational. And we learn in this next file that the Sentinel artifacts are artifacts tied directly to the Dark Aether, with either their origins or source of power tied directly to it. Well, people assumed that this was a dispelling of chaos and that this meant that the artifacts had to have a different origin now. I would argue that's not necessarily the case. The artifacts simply use the Dark Aether as their main source of power and are inherently tied to that dimension. But this does not break the law we have of their creation by the 9 in the Chaos story. It definitely adds to it, but does not contradict anything so far. Rhodes' file 27A1 reads, Ancient writings identify 4 known Sentinel artifacts: the Odin artifact, Danu artifact, Ra artifact, and Zeus artifact. All share a common morphology and function, with surface details corresponding to the cultures where they first appeared. The commonalities from such far-flung sources suggest widespread early contacts with a dark dimension and a point of origin beyond the terrestrial realm. I think what it's saying here is that the Sentinel artifacts being spread throughout the world and through different cultures suggest that many different cultures throughout time and humanity had contact to the Dark Aether and their entities, and that now it seems like all of these gods, or at least how humans perceive them, were just Dark Aether gods. The 9 created the artifacts under incredibly mysterious and unexplained circumstances. All we know is that they are ancient, unknowable devices capable of creating and harnessing the power of prima materia, created by these ancient geniuses. This would actually plug quite nicely in with the new lore we have if fan theories are correct, and prima materia is an element inherently tied to the Dark Aether. We've seen it time and time again now, from the Liberty Falls Church with small patches of it to full-blown prima materia pods in the tomb. And I now believe this is because we are on the precipice of learning that prima materia is sourced exclusively from the Dark Aether. Could it be that this mystical substance is somehow tied to the destruction of our old multiverse? Some primordial clay recreated by mushing an infinite multiverse of everything together and destroying it. The decay of the old ether, the result of Nikolai's actions, which is why it is like this moldy dark fungus. The rot of the ether. It's dying material. It could make sense. Prima materia has the ability to create and shape everything. And anything you could theoretically imagine surely existed in that prior and infinite multiverse. So that could be the foundation for its building blocks. Prima materia means first matter, so it could be because it's the matter of the ether, the original galaxy. This would tie everything full circle and why chaos did not exist before and is now only in this new universe. Since we see prima materia in the Dark Aether, if it was always there, it surely would have come up in the Aether story before otherwise. Now this mention of it being tied to the other realm in the ending cutscene is leading people to think the artifacts may directly originate or even have been built and crafted from the Dark Aether realm itself. But this paragraph does not necessarily confirm this, but they are definitely related and tied to the Dark Aether and the gods that are now being recontextualized as being from there. Which is why we saw similar gods bond with humanity in Vanguard Zombies, as this was probably soft launching the idea. Vanguard Zombies, although it received a lot of hate, its story kind of is the through line connecting the more scientific story of Cold War zombies and the more magical stuff that we saw in that game. It's putting chaos in the middle. Regardless of whether they originate from the realm or are just tied to it but were made in the real world, this is a big change to the status quo. Many are now asking why we collect the Odin artifacts from Voyage of Despair, specifically on the tomb, and why it's in the Dark Aether. If the theory that they originate from the realm is true, it could be that after the trials are completed / they are abandoned, they naturally go back to their origin points or home in the Dark Aether. And maybe the Dark Aether Nexus is where the Odin one originally came from. This would mean that after we were done with the Titanic and the trial is completed, we obviously know everything reverts to normal, time is reversed as if nothing happened. The zombies revert back to human, they don't remember anything and go on with their day, which allowed the chaos story to not mess with the real world history, and could even tie into my recent theories about time travel that Richtofen has been experimenting with and a potential return to a cycle. We know Richtofen and Sam are fighting for the Sentinel Artifact. If the Sentinel Artifact, once the trial is completed, allows everything to be reverted, surely it would create some sort of cycle and time loop. Maybe it could even be how Richtofen plans to bring his family back through some sort of time loop, using the power of the artifact. But if the Odin artifact did originate from the Dark Aether Nexus, then it would have been there before it was on the Titanic, then have ended up there, and then gone back. This is an extremely far distance to travel though, and is very convoluted, but I guess you could argue that you could teleport to anywhere through the Dark Aether, I guess. It's very confusing right now and we definitely need more concrete information on this, so I hope it does tie into everything with Richtofen's plan, because right now we don't really know how the artifacts connect with the Dark Aether specifically, we just know they are related. And a very interesting thing is that we know that since the Nine made the artifacts to harness prima materia, that if they originate from the Dark Aether, then surely this would mean that the Nine were Dark Aether gods / entities themselves. If this theory is correct, that is. This would completely change our understanding, as we always assumed they were humans, but this could actually make sense because they eventually led to the new cult, the Order, being formed, the High Priest being the through line, as he survived for thousands of years, as he and others became practically immortal after being resurrected with the Staff of Ra, which would give them a red glow on their forehead to indicate that they had now been taken over and corrupted to follow the cult. Kortifex, when he controlled the zombies, would give them a red glow on their forehead too. It could be that, like the artifacts in Vanguard Zombies that the gods used to bond with humanity, Ra was a Dark Aether god, and the staff was their artifacts that allowed them to bond with humanity. And later in this video, I will even discuss some new revelations on the map which could even suggest that Kortifex could have been interpreted by humanity as Ra, or at the very least, knew the god Ra, or who humans perceived as Ra. Regardless, it seems like he may have even been involved in the inception of the Staff of Ra, whether he was its creator itself or simply passed it along to the Egyptians, explaining the similarity between the red marking on the foreheads and the fact that his artifacts that he gave to Von List rose the dead, whereas the Staff of Ra resurrects the dead. Do you think the Nine are Dark Aether gods or just humans? Potentially with powers thanks to the Dark Aether? Either could work, I guess. They could have made the artifacts in the real world or in the other dimension, but if they were made in the real world, how did they harness prima materia, and why exactly does the Odin artifact end up in the Dark Aether? Let me know all of your theories in the comments. It is theorized that the artifacts could even have a level of sentience, considering it fights us on the tomb and moves there, with Archibald and his excavators feeling great despair around it and feeling like it could be watching them. This sounds awfully similar to the construct, where it too was thought to judge life's worthiness to keep existing, and made people complete trials to prove their worthiness for its infinite power. The artifacts also make people complete trials and have the abilities to essentially grant wishes if they unlock the power of prima materia, such as the Sam AI getting a real body/soul, or Richtofen recreating his family. I wonder if the artifacts or prima materia could even relate to the Vanguard zombie story and the construct in any way, especially when we saw these red Dark Aether crystals in that game, and prima materia also featured red crystals. They look literally identical, so are they now one and the same? I'm not exactly sure. But speaking of the 9, in the boss fight against the Odin artifact, it keeps reflecting itself over and over until near the end of the fight, where it eventually creates 9. It being a mirror, this is cool and makes sense. 8 go below it, which then beams up to charge the larger, original, non-mirrored version of itself. The mirroring is cool as well when Kraft likens the artifacts to Syraxis' mirror in Vanguard Shinonuma, and Ava even gets pulled through a mirror. And the real world and the Dark Aether and its veil between them is often described as a mirror, as the Dark Aether realm mirrors reality and copies from it. And considering the Sentinel artifacts seem to get their power from the Dark Aether realm, and they are mirrors, surely that has something to do with how it's able to harness the power. It's all connected. This artifact is now more powerful than the others and glows a mysterious purple by the end of the fight. It has been theorized for a while that, like there being the 9 cult, each one made their own artifact, so 9 total. So far though, and as shown by Sam in the ending, there are only 4 shown. The Odin artifact, the Zeus artifact, the Danu artifact, and the Ra artifact, like previously mentioned. Are there 5 others that got lost? It is unclear if the real artifacts can combine all together in a similar way to how we see it mirrored in the boss fight, or if this was just a cool reference/nod to the 9. Carver even makes reference to it in the fight, saying that's it! 9 is officially an unlucky number. It could be an illusion/confirmation that there were 9 created by the 9, each creating 1 each, which would be especially more interesting if the 9 were the very gods themselves that are tied to it. But it is the very same artifact splitting up 9 times, but despite that it could represent each of the 9, each piece representing one of the creators of the Sentinel artifact, them combining representing the will of the 9 in the agreement. Alternatively, the 9 could just be each of the humans that bonded with each of the Dark Aether gods, Odin, Zeus, etc. As opposed to Dark Aether entities themselves being the 9, it makes more sense that it's like Vanguard zombies, where the 9 are just the people bonded to each one. But I digress, we definitely need a lot more theorizing and confirmation with things because there's so many possibilities right now. I have heard some people saying that the boss is all 9 artifacts, but if you look at the model for it, and all of them, it's very clearly all the same model of the Odin one mirroring each other. So this is not the case, but it could have been trying to mirror itself to replicate what all 9, if real, could do if powered together to create a super Sentinel artifact. These are not all different artifacts we see, they are just mirrored. Moving along, we hear from the Sam AI that the Sentinel artifacts require shards of Tempest to be charged. But what exactly is this? We can make some assumptions, though we don't know anything for sure yet. The word Tempest is a Latin word meaning time or specific duration of time. This is interesting, as combining this with Sam saying the elements required can only be found in Liberty Falls begins to paint a picture of what we might be about to do. We know that the mansion is the temporal flux headquarters for Janus. Could it be this time travel was in some sort of attempt to gather Tempest? But what exactly is it? A moment in time or a shard of time? Sounds very similar to a memory. An echo, just as Archibald is an echo that speaks to us through the amulet on the tomb. Could this be what Tempest is? Could the Sentinel artifact be powered by literal memories?
The amulet looks like it contains a tiny galaxy. It makes me wonder if this is all happening inside it.
Especially because in the ending cutscene, it says nothing is lost if the memories remain. This could very well tie to how the original characters return if the Sentinel artifact allows things or people to be pulled back and recreated with prima materia because those memories exist. And that leads back to our theory before that could prima materia be the ashes of the ether. This could definitely be how the original characters return, and could definitely be how Richtofen brings his family back due to the memories, and why anything can be built with prima prima materia because in a multiverse, like I said before, theoretically anything's possible. So if you can imagine it, that's essentially a memory of the old ether, even if you never experienced it. You think to yourself, what if I could fly? Well, I guess theoretically possible in the old etherverse there might have been a version of you that could. And maybe if Richtofen and Samantha never went through into the new universe and thus bringing forward the memories of the original characters, they would have been demised forever. But through some jibbity-hibbity writing, memories are people, memories are souls, which has been a through line in the zombie storyline for a very long time. Speaking of memories, at launch in Terminus, we also found an etching of a Sentinel Artifact on one of the cliff faces on one of the islands, an indication that people in this world know what it is. We theorized the identity of the etching to likely be Richtofen or Owen Guthrie. But if memories can be brought to life, this explains why when we mesmerize it with the Beam Smasher, it teleports us and brings forward power of the Sentinel Artifact just through the mere etching itself. It makes it real. Richtofen would obviously have been to Terminus during its creation, maybe he was even the one who did it. But Guthrie surely found out about it researching the Janus files and spent plenty of time hiding on the external islands, so it was very likely him. However, with this new lore about the Sentinel Artifacts being so integrated into earlier cultures, it now stands to reason this etching may be as ancient as the temple it is carved beside, and could have been done by one of the cultures that worshipped Odin. And since triggering the magical reaction with the Beam Smasher, it suggests that even a simple drawing of it holds power. An idea deeply rooted in Chaos lore, as well as the wall drawings of weapons in that game could manifest objects through prima materia magic. And now the stories are basically one and the same. This could very well be how the chalk drawings of the walls manifest weapons as well, although Monty aided with that. And why Weaver was etching into his wall many things such as the construct as well as wall weapons, trying to bring these memories to life. Another intel entry mentions an order of priests who originally populated the temples in the tomb. Now, this could be a reference to the Order of Chaos, which was hinted at in Black Ops 4, or it could go back even further to the Nine, the ancient figures tied to the Nine arena map, not to be confused with the group themselves, in Black Ops 4 and the Arena of Blood rituals. There are many different paintings and carvings showing people fighting bulls, as well as them having a supper around a table, very reminiscent of the Last Supper. Given that the Nine were already deeply connected to the Sentinel Artifacts and the practice of alchemical rituals, it makes perfect sense that we'd find remnants of their influence in these ancient ruins. Either of these groups appearing in the Dark Aether story would be gargantuan in terms of their implications and serve as essentially 100% proof the stories are the same. But for now, the ancient order of the priests in the tomb remains unnamed, and we don't have enough details to be certain, but it would be cool and could explain as well why this is the site where the Odin artifacts remains. During the Easter egg, we spend time activating the spires using statues of the various stages of evolution of the Dark Aether creatures from vermin to amalgams. This shines an energy at an altar, creating a bridge to the Dark Aether, holding the Sentinel Artifact and opening the boss fight. When the altar is energized, symbols of the four stages of evolution illuminate the colors of the crystals their statues hold. These colors, yellow, red, blue and green, also the colors of the portals. And these hold meaning for the Chaos storyline as well. These are the very colors that represent the four primary elements of alchemy: water, fire, air, and earth. These elements are extremely pertinent to the Chaos storyline, as they feature in every single Chaos map in some way, usually in the main quest. Here are the symbols that represent these elements, seen across the Chaos story. Blue, water, is represented through the electric mimics. Yellow, air, for the parasites, as they obviously literally fly. Green, earth, the doppelgas. Red, fire, the amalgams. While we are on the topic of the symbols for elements in Chaos, the symbol for quintessence, an alchemy term for ether or chaos, and the elemental name for prima materia looks very similar to the runes we saw in Modern Warfare Zombies, and thusly some of the gateways in the tomb as well. Which has to be a reference, and it's so interesting in the real world story, the mention of ether and chaos, and now they are tied through the Dark Aether story, and it's especially interesting as well because the Keepers and the Apothegons were always explained as being the duality between order and chaos, which is so relevant to today. But here's where things get really interesting. A road Rhodes file in the cutscene explicitly states that Kortifex, one of the Dark Aether entities, had appeared in Egyptian history all the way back to the pre-dynastic period. That means we are talking anywhere between 300,000 BC to 3,100 BC, essentially the entire span of human civilization in the region before the unification of Egypt. This is significant because the Ra artifact, one of the 4 Sentinel artifacts, was given to the Egyptians by Kortifex. This means that Egyptian religion itself was influenced by Dark Aether forces. If Kortifex was involved in the creation of early Egyptian civilization, then it suggests that Chaos mythology and Dark Aether mythology are fully intertwined. And could Ra even be what these humans long ago viewed Kortifex as? Or maybe he was just friends with Ra, or was part of his group. But Kortifex was very self-preserving. A particularly fascinating detail is the mention of Amenhotep. In the Rhodes file, the Song of Amenhotep describes how Kortifex gifted him an artifact, which allowed him to manipulate time itself. But here's the real kicker. Amenhotep had a son, Amenhotep IV, who would go on to become Akhenaten, and is this artifact that allowed him to manipulate time the Sentinel Artifact itself, which would again suggest that potentially they did in fact originate from the realm, especially because it has time manipulation properties, which again could factor into Richtofen's plan considering he wants to distort time. Akhenaten is famous in history for completely dismantling the old Egyptian religion and replacing it with worship of a single god, the Aten, the sun disk. This change has puzzled historians for centuries. Where would a pharaoh suddenly declare that the gods of his ancestors, Ra, although Ra was probably just another interpretation from humans, Ra, Amun, Osiris, and others were false? The answer may lie in the tomb. If Amenhotep IV discovered that his father had been consorting with Kortifex, a being from the Dark Aether, it's entirely possible that he saw the existing Egyptian religion as fundamentally corrupt. He may have realized that the gods his people worshipped were actually Dark Aether entities, and in response, sought to establish a new religion free from their influence. This seems more than likely than Kortifex being viewed as Ra, and Ra being a Dark Aether entity. As in the Vanguard Zombie story, many of those gods were viewed by humanity as various different mythological gods in the real world, or some of them merged with already existing ideas, cultures, religions, and myths and legends. When humanity would view them as these myths and legends, these gods would go along with it and use them to their own agenda, or some inspired the ideas to begin with and the myths. This could explain why Akhenaten's reign was so short-lived and why his changes were completely undone after his death. The priests of Egypt, many of whom were likely aware of Kortifex's influence, worked to erase his legacy, restoring the old gods and ensuring that their connection to the Dark Aether remained hidden. It should be noted, however, that there is a peculiarity with this Rhodes file. As I said, the date is given as 4100 BC, in the pre-dynastic period of Egypt. Amenhotep IV, better known as Akhenaten, would not be born until around 1300 BC, 2800 years before Amenhotep IV, or any of the previous Amenhoteps for that matter, were even born. Is this a mistake on Treyarch's part, or perhaps an indication of the reality-bending, time-warping capabilities of the Sentinel Artifact? After all, we know time literally stands still when the Sentinel Artifact is used, and if the trial is successfully completed, those affected return to normal. It is possible that an effect like this sent this Song of Amenhotep back further into the past. In fact, in the text itself for this Song of Amenhotep, we see the phrase, feeds its shards of Tempest. Tempest is Latin for time, so indeed perhaps the element that the Sentinel Artifact needs to charge it up is somehow related to time itself. And again, this very well could play into the larger picture of Richtofen's plan and some kind of cycle, especially because we see these statues of these amalgams, for example, that were supposedly Modi's creation. Unless these are just natural evolutions of the Dark Aether and she just managed to recreate them, then this could suggest at some point these amalgams get sent back to the ancient Great War, the battlegrounds of the tomb. For years, we've been arguing about whether chaos mattered. Was it just a one-off, a fun experiment, a side story that Treyarch abandoned? The tomb proves that none of that was true. Chaos was always meant to be a part of the bigger picture. I do not believe they are only just now retroactively inserting it into the storyline. I wholeheartedly believe with how well everything fits together that they always planned for it to merge once the cycle would reboot with the ending of Aether, which I think was the plan for a while as well. And now, with Black Ops 6 is finally getting the recognition recognition it deserves. As even looking back to Cold War Zombies and Vanguard, there were mentions of Atlantis, and the ties to the Chaos story are paramount, with Poseidon being spelled out by the gateway in Ancient Evil. It's almost as if they always intended for this to tie together. Scarlet, Alistair, Shaw, the artifacts, the rituals, it's all here right now in the story, fully integrated into the Dark Aether narrative. And with all of that laid out, one thing is clear. Treyarch always had a plan, and the plan was Chaos. So next time someone tells you Chaos wasn't canon, show them this video. The proof is right here, written in ancient text, hidden in artifacts, and spoken through the echoes of history. It's all connected, and we are just getting started. But where do we go from here? Could we see the Chaos characters return alive in the new story? Could we end up going back in time and seeing the events that happened after Ancient Evil? Josiah Shem does describe the ground where they built the mansion as a serpent's mound. Could this be a reference to Medusa? Does she even have an ancient tomb here? Could she be the voice they heard and the way we find out what happened after Ancient Evil? What her plan was with heading to the Library of the Order. Thanks to Spartan Boski on Twitter for pointing this out, but it turns out that serpent mounds are a prehistoric earthwork in the shape of a serpent, typically constructed by ancient indigenous cultures. These mounds are made by piling earth into raised embankments that form a winding or coiled serpent-like shape. The most famous example is the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio, America, and is believed to have been built by the Ardini or Fort Ancient cultures between 1000 BC and 1100 CE. Serpent mounds are thought to have had religious, astronomical, or ceremonial significance. Some theories suggest they align with celestial events such as solstices or lunar cycles, while others propose they were used for burial purposes or as territorial markers. In summary, their origins are essentially unknown, and it's also unknown as to why they were built in the first place. But they are thought to have been created by various ancient cultures thousands of years ago, dotted on positions to align with sunrise and setting. So, could this be interpreted as societies that many ancient cultures built under instruction of Dark Aether gods for an unknown purpose, and the hill could have history spanning thousands of years, which is why it was chosen by the god instructing Shem specifically? Could the Origins Pack-a-Punch Mound where Primus fought the Great War even be considered one of these original serpent mounds that they/the Keepers built? Or could they perhaps save that for a future game? Yes, the leaks have shown us that COD 2025 will feature the return of the original Zombies characters in a valiant effort to prevent the multiverse from being restored. But once that is all said and done, where do zombies go from there? Well, we know that in 1914 at the World's Fair, Alistair is still alive and well enough to meet Gabriel Kraft. Yet, in 1912, he is still frozen in stone after the events of Ancient Evil by Medusa, the last time we saw the Chaos story. This leaves 2 years of unknown story left to be told, and a brilliant setting for 1 to 2 future games. Alternatively, I think it would be so cool if we have some sort of cycle and we get thrown back into the ancient times, more so akin to the map 9, and we can play in ancient times for a whole game and learn the origins of the 9 cult themselves. I think that would be awesome for a game. You know, apart from that map, we haven't really had any ancient history zombies maps, and even the crew on that map gets sent back through the alchemical hallucination, so they are really setting up the possibility that we could go back there. That would be awesome. We wrap up the stuff with the original characters, we go back to the Chaos stuff, but to a time that I think is way more interesting and has not really been touched on and explored in Zombies much. Because we've had so many allusions, like I've discussed in this video, to these ancient gods speaking and interacting with humanity. And even in the old Aether story, the Keepers and Apothecans would fight amongst each other in many ways, such as in the Great War, and the Keepers especially nudged humanity throughout. God, there is so much potential, I think, for ancient history zombies games. I think that would be so epic, and I think that would be the perfect thing for them to do after they do whatever they're doing in COD 2025 Zombies. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree that it's becoming glaringly obvious that we are in the Chaos storyline still, and potentially have always been? Or do you think they are now just retroactively inserting it? I disagree. I think there's just too much evidence here, and stuff we can think back to that seems like they were sowing these seeds for a while. Do you think that's a good or a bad thing? And what could it mean for the future? Both Eddie's plans and beyond that. Let me know down below. And let me know if you have any more questions or storyline videos you want me to make about the tomb, because there's a lot to talk about. Anyways, thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not here for latest and greatest Call of Duty news information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye.